Hey there friends, thanks for joining me again. And this video I want to talk to you about picking the perfect fruit tree. So the first thing you want to consider is the fact that you need to know your zone. So when you're picking your fruit trees, no matter where you're getting them from, it's very important that you know not only your USDA zone, whether you're zone 2, 3, 5, whatever, even more specifically like 5A, 5B, that sort of thing, but also your just local conditions and things like that. Because even if a tree, if you're in zone 5 like I am, is suited for zone 5, it may not be suited to your area. Like there are certain trees that will need higher humidity than we're able to get here in our dry Colorado weather. So yeah, definitely first and foremost, know your zone and make sure that you're picking stuff that's going to work within your zone, but also your specific, climate conditions that you get where you're living. Another thing you're going to want to know about is your soil. This is actually really important because soil pH can greatly affect whether or not a plant will survive or thrive, whether it's going to get root rot or die, or whether it will just live very happily. So definitely want to make sure this is something that you could just look up or you could test to find out what your soil pH is, and then also what kind of nutrition that your soil may have, so that you can, make sure to add what you need to add or do what you need to do to fix it, or just picking the right varieties of things that will actually work for your conditions. The next thing would be to pick the right size for the amount of space that you have. I mentioned this in the introduction video on this little mini series, but definitely just a real quick recap in case you missed that. Semi-dwarf, or excuse me, let's go with the smallest one. Dwarfs grow from about 8 to 10 feet tall. Semi-dwarfs grow from about 10 to 20 feet tall, and then standard can grow 20 to way above that. So if you have a certain amount of space, you need to make sure that you're getting the right size tree for the amount of space that you actually have. Also consider maintenance. This is also, kind of tied to that whole size issue. So the bigger trees are obviously going to take more maintenance when it comes to things like pruning or, putting a net over it to keep the wildlife and the birds and the, squirrels and other things from stealing all your fruits. Or, the larger trees may not even be able to be netted, that sort of thing. Or harvesting, just basic gardening tasks. They can become more difficult when you're choosing a larger tree. So that's definitely something to consider if, you don't want to have to do something that's going to, take a whole lot more work. You may want to choose a smaller tree for that reason. Even within the specific types of trees, there are different maintenance requirements. Like when I had my other house and we had a variety of trees that we had there, apricots were really easy to grow. I pretty much just planted the tree, it grew, it started producing fruit. It never really had issues with any insects or anything like that. It was just an easy tree to grow. Whereas my peach tree, on the other hand, took a lot more time and effort. It was constantly getting different things. Sometimes it would get aphids and I'd have to deal with that, and then it would get peach tree borers and I would have to deal with that. So yes, each specific type of tree can have different maintenance requirements, and so this may be another thing you want to consider. Do you want to just plant the trees and just have them grow and work out, or do you have time to be able to, fix the different issues that may come along, or find, options and things like that to fix the problems that your tree may have? Self-pollinating, or if it needs a cross-pollinator. This is really important. So if you have a small amount of space, you got to think about whether or not this tree is going to be self-pollinating. So let's use cherries as an example. Most sweet cherries need a cross-pollinator, so if you want to grow cherries, frequently you'll have to plant 2 trees so that they can cross-pollinate in order to get a crop. If you plant only 1 sweet cherry, it may be that there's no cross-pollinator anywhere in the area and you may not get a crop out of it. So if you pick a variety that's self-pollinating, you can actually plant less and then still get a crop out of them. Or, like I said, you might have to plant, some other varieties so that they can cross-pollinate in order for you to get a, harvest. So, yes, this is definitely something to consider. You kind of got to weigh how much space you have versus whether or not it's self-pollinating or if you need pollinators and things like that. Required chill hours. So some, trees just need a certain amount of cold time in order for it to flower and fruit. So there are certain trees where it'll say, low chill requirement, so it's better suited for the south where they don't get too much cold weather. And then there are other varieties that need higher chill requirements, so they're better suited for places where it's up north maybe a little more and it actually stays colder over the winter. So definitely don't overlook this, because if you plant a tree that doesn't, if it needs more of a chill requirement than you're able to provide for it, like I said, it won't fruit or flower, so you don't want to spend all the money and then do all the work of planting it and then have it not work out. So definitely think about this one for sure. The fruit uses, this is another thing that you definitely want to think about. So different, varieties can be good for different things. So back to the cherry example, you could just say, oh, well, I just want to grow cherries. But then if you grow them and they're really tart and they're not really good for anything but say pies or preserves where you're going to be adding a lot of sugar, that may not be the best variety for where you're trying to grow them. So this is another thing you want to think about, unfortunately, what you're going to actually use them for and what each fruit is actually good for. So even within almost all of the varieties, if you want an apple tree, some apple trees are better suited for just fresh eating. Some are better for, long-term storage, if that's a goal of yours. Some are better for, applesauce, or, some are better for pie making, that sort of thing. And some varieties can be good for all of these uses. So when choosing your different varieties and things like that, obviously consider what the uses of the fruits are going to be. And then lastly is going to be disease resistance. So if you have an area or live in an area where you are susceptible to certain diseases, you might want to choose a variety that's, resistant to the diseases that you get. Choosing a tree with, disease resistance might make it so where you have less work to do and might make the whole tree less frustrating. All right, so you've picked the right variety for your area, considering your soil conditions, your zone, and just all these different things. How much maintenance it's going to take, the size of its maturity, all that. So now you've narrowed down what specific varieties you're looking for. Now it's time to actually look at the grouping of that variety and picking the right tree. So the first thing you want to look for is signs of life. The tree, if it's early in the season, doesn't have to have broken bud yet, but it definitely needs to look alive. So hopefully it has some greenness to it. If you, move its twigs and stuff like that, they don't just snap right away, which can all mean that the tree is dead. So they should be pliable, they should be able to move without being too dry or brittle. A few of them being dry like this one, that's okay, but you want to make sure most of them are alive. And of course other signs of life like these blossoms are definitely good, because then the tree is going to be alive. So that's obviously something good to look for. Another thing would be the way that the branches look. So these tiny little twigs like this may look small now, but that's going to be a major branch later on. So look at the branch pattern and make sure it looks like it's going to work for the area that you have. This is a semi-dwarf tree, and it says it's going to take between 12 and 15 feet of space. And so for the area that I have it, it's going to work perfectly, because actually it's a little bit bigger than that on both sides, which is good. So beginning with the end in mind, we're going to put this tree here, and it's going to be able to spread in both directions without it taking up too much space. And it also has a bit of an upright pattern, so it's not just going to go all over to the sides. So the branch pattern is definitely something to look for. And then also making sure you're looking for a tree that's nice and straight. If it's in the pot and the whole thing is straight but it's on its side, you can actually plant it, to where you tip it upward and it's going to go upward. So that's fine. But if the whole thing kind of goes up and then off to the side, that may not be a good choice, because branches that go off to the side can make the tree itself break if you get heavy amounts of snow. Branches breaking is extremely common, as I'm sure you know. So, high winds can make the branches fall, or even the whole tree. I mean, we've all heard the news story where so-and-so's tree or house got hit by a tree that fell over. So, if the whole tree is leaning on its side when you first plant it, it may not be able to be sturdy enough to withstand that high wind, that heavy snow, or even when it just gets big and heavy, it can just topple over and fall on whatever it is that's next to it. So that's something to consider for sure. So when you're picking your specific tree, make sure it has a nice branch pattern, it's nice and alive looking with some good, buds and things like that, and that it's nice and straight. If you can pick one that looks that way. Different trees have different, growth habits, so sometimes they can be like many branches, or sometimes they can be just one main branch with other branches off from it, like this one is. So yeah, this is definitely what you're going to want to think about when you're looking at the specific trees so that you can get the best one. So this is all of the tips that I use when looking for the perfect fruit trees and when I go to pick them out. And so yeah, hopefully these tips were helpful to you as well. I'm Frugal Green Girl, and I hope to see you next time. Thanks for watching.